Minions have always been a phenomenal leveling build due to their incredible early game power scaling, their complete lack of need for resources, and just how easy they are to get online. But this season they are exceptionally powerful. You can see it's just the end of the first day. I'm already hitting for 1.8 billion damage on the Golem active. I'm already destroying Torment 4, and I'm already able to absolutely obliterate Torment 3 Uber bosses. So if you don't know, game progression is much harder in Season 8. Thank God. The game actually requires a little bit of oomph to be able to clear through the torments, and it's going to require a strong build that comes online very quickly and easily, and that's why I think Minions are the best starter build for Necromancer, because it's a build that is able to do phenomenal amounts of damage with very low amounts of gear, and it's also able to achieve incredible amounts of survivability thanks to a sort of Paragon route that I take, as well as the ability to easily get 100% uptime on Soul Rift. This build ends up being very tanky and very high damage with very low investment, and as you can see, these are the results, right? Just into the first day, and I'm already clearing Torment 4. And obviously, I'm pretty tired, so I apologize in advance, for that. But I'm just really excited to talk about Minions, and I really want to start by talking about the seasonal mechanic, the new boss powers. So, the foundation of what is making Minions so much stronger than usual, like I said, normally really strong starter build, but this season they're really on another level, and this is in large part due to the Beastmaster's training. So this is a power that you get from doing the incursions, which is the new bossing event, and this power is currently giving me a 150% damage multiplier to my minions, and that number is going to scale both based on your Paragon, but also based on the amount of crit damage that you have, additive crit damage. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting, ideally double crit damage rolls on our weapon, and we're going to be using a two-handed sword as well for the implicit crit damage there. And we're going to be tempering on crit damage onto our jewelry and our gloves, and we're just looking to get as much crit damage as we can to stack this out. Now there is a cap, right? And we want to just fill this up to the cap as fast as we can. As you can see here, we're also going to be running the Essence Paragon node, which is going to give us a large amount of additive crit damage. Now eventually the goal is to drop the weapon for a grandfather and be able to max out our crit damage without having it on the weapon, but for now this is what we gotta do. And so the focus of this video is going to be talking about how you can start from wherever your character is now and take your character all the way into Torment 4. And as part of that, you really do need to get these boss powers early, so I definitely recommend you do the incursions very early on so you can start scaling it. We're also able to run this phenomenal boss power, which currently is giving me 34% crit chance based on my current shadow resistance. And because shadow resistance is so important to max out, we're going to be maxing this all the time, right? Because we want to maximize our resistances. This is going to become much more relevant, like as you get into torment difficulties and stuff. But really strong crit chance multiplier synergizes well with all this crit damage that we're getting, right? And finally, we're going to be picking up the Flesh Reaper's Disruption so that we're able to get an extra vulnerable damage multiplier. Now, something I want to teach you about these powers, because a lot of people don't know this. If you hover this power, right, you see how it's ranked 12 out of 20, and it's currently giving me 34% crit chance, right? If I press F, I can spend my resources to upgrade it, and you can see now it's, instead of giving me 34, I'm now getting 44% crit chance, right? So this is absolutely phenomenal, and you want to max out your Beastmaster's trainings first, then you want to get the crit, and then you want to get the Flesh Reapers later on. Now, you can see, I'm not yet stacking the crowd control duration. This is something that's going to come later, but so, we prioritize those the lowest. Now, for our primary boss power, I'm currently using the Duriel power because it makes your evade turn you immune, and it's also going to allow you to move through units, and it's also going to, it looks like it gives you a movement speed buff. It doesn't say that it does, but it seems like it does. And so this power ends up being pretty decent. While leveling, your power really doesn't matter that much. Just toss on whatever. Probably the strongest one is the poison one that you get from the world boss. This one here from Ashava. It's probably the strongest one when leveling, but your boss power is not super important. Just pick one with a big damage number that you can proc, and then as you get into the end game, swap into Duriel's Burrow. Now, let's talk about the Book of the Dead next, because this is a really interesting piece of the build. Because really, for a long time, minions have been mages and golem, right? And for a long time, mages and golem were really similar setups with only like a few differences that really differentiated them. But they ended up being like 100% mage or 100% golem, right? Those were the optimal setups. And still, for pip pushing, the best setups are still going to be purely mage focus or purely golem focus. But that being said, for early game farming, it is really nice to have a hybrid focus where you're buffing both the mages and the golems up. And so, to that extent, we're going to be starting out with the mages on the additional Shadow Bolt, and we're going to be swapping this later once we get the Ring of Mendeln, which I'll talk more about the Ring of Mendeln when we get to that. But you're going to be starting your mages on Shadow, specifically the extra bolt every 3 attacks, and then once you get the Ring of Mendeln, you're going to be swapping them over to a % damage multiplier. That's because, these extra attacks don't count for proccing the Mendeln, but this % damage does scale the Mendeln, and it's also going to scale the Golem's damage. And for the Golem, the build that we're going to be scaling into is very focused on Golem damage. So that means we have to play Blood, we have to play this one, because it's a 50% damage buff, which is super crazy. So we're getting a 50% damage buff on them, and the active on the Blood Golem is just ridiculously powerful. It does loads of damage, and the damage is tripled in single target. Now, for our skeletons, these are very interesting, the warriors. Now, you're going to be playing Reapers, but you have 2 options. So you have the reduce one of your active cooldowns by 3 seconds, or form a corpse. What I have found is that when you're speed farming, if you're really strong and you're farming easy content, this cooldown reduction is phenomenal. It gives you way better uptime on Soul Rift, gives you way better uptime on the Golem active, massively reducing its cooldown, and it ends up being crazy strong. But against bosses, and for reasons that'll become more evident as we get deeper into the build, you really need this flesh corpse generation, specifically against tanky bosses. Now, against like the bosses that are in my speed farms, I don't need this, right? Because I'm killing them in 2 seconds. But if the boss is going to live longer than 2 seconds, you really need the corpse generation. And you'll see more why as we get deeper into the build. So, as I kind of said, we're going to be focused on buffing the Golem. So, what does that look like, and when do you kind of transition into focusing on the Golem versus the mages? Like, how does all this interact? Well, the big thing that we're focusing with the Golem starts with Fell Gluttony. This is going to be the first piece that you get where you really start to amp the Golem damage. It's going to make it so whenever you activate the Golem, it is going to do an extra hit that does a load of physical damage, a ton of damage, and this is going to scale with all of your Golem damage multipliers. So you're going to get an extra huge hit along with the Golem active every time you activate it, and it's also going to make it so the Golem eats corpses around it to reduce its active cooldown. So you're going to get a lot more actives on the Golem once you get this. So you can start to see this is going to scale the Golem's damage quite a bit. Now, the second piece, and the piece that you're going to get as you start to get into Torment 1, and a very important piece, not quite as important as the Mendeln, and we're going to talk about the Mendeln in a second, but the Blood Moon Breaches. These have 3 ranks of Golem Mastery, right? So this, again, is pushing us towards Golem Focus, and 3 ranks of Helmet Commander, which buff all your minions, which is pretty nice. And then they have a generic 50% damage multiplier on crits for both your mages and your Golem in this case. So you can see there's some like hybrid investment from this, right? And the Ring of Mendeln really amplifies that by giving you ranks to all minions in terms of the minion mastery, and then it's also going to empower all minions with this area of effect attack that happens every 6th attack. Now, when you're clearing this, your mages will actually do enough damage to kill stuff with the Mendeln. They actually end up doing quite a bit of damage, even with this minimal investment setup that we're going for. So the idea of this setup is that the Golem is there as the heavy hitter. He solo clears hard content, basically, and he also is like basically solo killing bosses. But in easy content, and when you're like overgearing, the Ring of Mendeln turns your mages into AoE clearing beasts, and it makes this build really fast for farming, right? Or really fast is an overstatement, okay? It makes this build acceptable for farming, because minions in general are very slow for farming, okay? You can see even these like fast runs I'm doing are still like 3 minutes, which, in terms of Necro, 3 minutes isn't that bad, but our fastest builds are going to be as low as like 2.5 minutes or 2 minutes on really good pit runs, whereas minions, like the fastest minion runs you're going to see are going to be like 3 minutes, maybe 2.5 on like a crazy run. And so like minions are generally slower, but the Ring of Mindel enables your mages to become AoE clearers, which really helps pick up the pace with clearing. Now, another really important thing to accelerate your clear, I actually don't know if I have a roll right now. I don't. But another important thing is corpse tendril size. The problem is corpse tendril size temperings are competing with Soul Rift duration temperings. Your number one priority is to get 100% uptime on Soul Rift. But once you get that, then you can start to add in corpse tendril size rather than Soul Rift on some of your pieces, and you're going to end up getting significantly better AoE clear and a lot faster farm. However, you can't really do this until much later in the game. You need more masterworking, you need higher quality items, all that stuff. But, you know, something to keep in mind. Something else that's really important to talk about is the Runewords. So these Runewords are not best in slot. This is not the end-all be-all of what you want to run, but this is going to give you a foundation of how you should be kind of thinking about it. So, when you're leveling, you don't get to pick your Runewords, right? In the early in-game, you don't get to pick your Runewords. You run what you get. So Fio is a really important Runeword, though. And it's the trigger is when you become injured or crowd controlled. Now, the effect can vary depending on what you get. Lack is amazing. It is the best in slot 1. It's going to give you Challenging Shout, which is going to give you a huge amount of damage reduction. But if you don't have Lack, you could run Zol, for example, where you get 20% maximum life, and that'll get procced. Remember, every time you get a low life, that'll get procced. Or you can run, hopefully I have one, the Druid Bulwark one. I might not have one, but, you know, if you don't get the Challenging Shout, maybe you'll get the Bulwark one. You toss in the Bulwark. The point is, you want to tie these together, like the defensive ability with the going low life or getting crowd controlled. This effect is just really powerful. And if you don't have this, I would rather just run Topaz in my gear for the extra all-res and stuff. But, you know, like I said, once you get the Fio, you're going to want to throw in a defensive tempering. Now, this other one is really important. Again, this one is going to be focused on the effect. So, reduce your active cooldown, your active ultimate cooldown by 2 seconds. That's the effect. We want to run that. But there's a lot of different things that can make that work. Right now, I'm playing it with Neo, which is just avoid health damage while fighting for 2 seconds, and then it's going to reduce my ultimate cooldown for 2 seconds. So this is effectively going to have the cooldown of my ultimate, right? Because every 2 seconds, it's going to take 2 seconds off the cooldown of the ultimate. But you can also run the, whenever you move, reduce the cooldown on your ultimate. You can run when you have your minions out, reduce the cooldown on your ultimate. There's a lot of good triggers that you can run here that are all totally acceptable. The goal is to just get 100% uptime on Soul Rift. Now, I've been talking about Soul Rift a lot, okay? Soul Rift is busted. Like, this ability just does everything. It's totally broken. I actually cannot believe it's still in the game in its current state, because this ability is just broken. What Soul Rift is going to do is it's going to give you infinite essence. Not that it matters, because we don't spend it. But we will later, once you get a Great Feast. I still haven't gotten a freaking Great Feast, despite the fact that I'm Paragon 158. But once you get one, Essence Generation, very important. It's also going to give you infinite barrier, basically. As long as it's out, you're just generating loads of barrier every second. It's going to give you a 75% damage multiplier that persists for 5 seconds after this ends. I don't know why. And then it's also going to make everything vulnerable. And as if all that's not enough, also, if your Soul Rift ends, it's going to fear everything for 5 seconds. So, yeah, this ability is just absolutely ludicrous, and you really want to get 100% uptime on it. This is a 75% damage multiplier. It is effectively a 50% damage reduction because it's doubling your life, right, in forms of barrier. It's also life regen because it generates so much barrier per second. It functions as life regen, and it's also going to apply vulnerable for another 20% damage, as if all of that wasn't enough. So yeah, Soul Rift is pretty freaking OP. It's really important that we get the most amount of uptime possible. Now, in terms of the skill tree, I'm not going to dive super deep into it, but, you know, some basic considerations. You'll notice we are going Skeletal Warrior Mastery. This is for the same reason why Mindel is good in this build. The Warriors don't do a ton of damage, but those Mindel procs still hurt, right? And the Warrior Mastery is going to buff those Mindel procs from the Warriors specifically. We're also still picking up Mage Mastery for the same reason, just to give them some damage amplifiers. You know, we're putting some extra points into Corpse Tendrils to reduce the cooldown so we can get better uptime on it. And I think that's pretty much all that's interesting, right? We're just, pretty standard minion stuff, nothing too crazy. Now, the Paragon board is really important when you're starting. And this Paragon board might end up looking a little bit different than the one that's in the leveling build right now. But I think that this ends up being better. So, the number one priority is race to cult leader as fast as possible. So you can see here's my starting board. We're going to go up the resistance side because we need these resistances so badly. Resistances and armor are the two biggest things that are going to prevent you from progressing. And the third biggest thing is going to be damage, progressing through the tournaments. So, first priority, cult leader, right? This is just brain dead broken. This is 5 separate instances of a 40% damage multiplier. Okay, this ends up being like 300% damage. We need to get this as fast as possible. And remember, it's also very important. We need to get our minion attack speed to 100%, which we're doing that in a couple of ways. The biggest one is Frenzy Dead on the amulet, right? So it's just 63%. Immediately shoots us up there. So it's important to make sure you have enough attack speed. After getting this cult leader, we're going to shoot straight over here to Hulking Monstrosity. This is a 100% damage buff for the Golem. This is part of what makes the Golem so freaking strong, right? Doubled the damage of the Golem. This doubles the damage of Mendeln. This doubles the damage of Fell Gluttony. Doubles the damage of the Golem's auto attacks. Really, really freaking strong. Then what we're going to do is we're actually going to pick up the Scent of Death board. Scent of Death was changed to do this ridiculous thing where it's now giving us 15% damage reduction and 30% increased crit damage. This is a phenomenal early game board. This is absolutely amazing. Not only does Scent of Death give you, 15% DR and 30% damage because, we're able to crit cap so easily, right? So this is just 30% damage and 15 DR. But this board also has these amazing nodes right here. So 1.5 all res, 1.5 all res, 3% all res with 5% damage reduction, and then these are all 2.5 damage reduction. This is a absurdly powerful batch of nodes. And then, if all of that wasn't enough, we come up here and we get a bunch of armor nodes. This is going to catapult us forward in our progression of our character because we're going to get so many extra resistances, so much extra armor, and so much extra damage reduction from picking up this little section of the board here. Now, in the ultimate in-game version of the build, we're probably not going to play this, but this section is very important for progressing through the tournaments. Now, once you've got that, then you're going to go pick up the Flesh Eater board and get Flesh Eater for 40% damage. And this was kind of buffed this season. I wouldn't worry about it. Basically, you can restack the next one while the other one's already going, so you can kind of like meld them into each other. Because it used to be like you would like stack your Flesh Eater eating the corpses, right? And then time would tick down, it would go down, and then you would start your next, try to get to 5 again. Now the second stack of 5 starts while the other one is still going, and you can roll them into each other, which is kind of nice. They don't stack, they just combine, right? The times combine or whatever. So that's kind of interesting. And then we're going to come up here and get these resistance nodes and maximum life nodes, which are really good. And once you have all that, it's going to be really easy to res cap and armor cap to get into higher torments. Now, you'll notice that I didn't talk a lot about glyphs yet, and that's because glyphs are much weaker than any legendary node and much weaker than these like clusters that you're going to get in general. Glyphs are a bonus thing that we pick up as we progress, but they're not a priority. However, we do want to get the glyphs. What you kind of want to do is you want to like spend your points to get your glyphs online, right? So like right here I'm running corporeal, right? Movement speed damage, this is great. And at the very start, maybe I'll put some of these points in int to make sure I can get this corporeal, but I'm going to remove those points to get to cult leader faster once I get enough Paragon points, right? And it's going to be the same thing, right? After Hulking Monstrosity, it takes a long time to be able to get to Scent of Death. So we might as well, grab a glyph here. Grab the Golem glyph. Grab some of these damage nodes and stuff. And then, we'll start to save up points. And eventually, once we have enough points, we want to take all these glyphs out, and we want to just shoot our way over here as fast as we can. If you're trying to min-max and progress really quickly, that's how you'll do the Paragon board. This isn't needed, though, if you don't want to play that, advanced. But it's actually going to help a lot in your progression, because the game takes a little bit of effort to get through these days. So, if you play like that, it'll be a little bit easier. Let's talk about gear, and then that'll be it. But the gear is very, very important. Really important rules, okay? Soul Rift Duration Temperings, super important. Golem active cooldown reduction, very important. Crit damage, right, for scaling our boss power, very important. But more important than any of those things are going to be resistances. And I wouldn't even say armor, though. Resistances are going to be the more important of those things. So it's like resistances, then all those things I just listed, which are like primarily damage, and then armor. And so we're going to be tempering on armor, all this stuff. And I want to point out that I am running Juggernaut, and this is going to give us a load of armor, because we have so many percentage armor increases from temperings and even from our skill tree. Through the spiked armor, we're getting extra percent armor there, so it's going to make it fairly easy to armor cap. We get like all these resistances, you know, optimize your gems around whether you need resistances or armor. But yeah, anyway, that's going to pretty much do it for today's video. Hopefully I wasn't too ranty. I hope you got something out of it. I am super freaking tired, so I really hope that this video works for you guys. But I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.